And I was
Finally, Al, I wanted to ask you. So distance is like a whole different perception of distance now.
right.
Back in like the persimmon era of golf, even going up into like the early '90s. Now it's like everybody wants to see the guy that hits it the longest,
Right.
and even the other tour players they'll like make a little half circle around Bryson when he came back out swinging so fast.
Right.
What was kind of the mentality of distance back then? Was it just like another tool in the toolbox, or was it really a
Hogan didn't swing for distance unless he had to.
okay?
And he would say himself, he said, distance is not bad.
Did you see Hogan a couple times where he just totally opened it up? Like how much extra was there in the tank for?
Oh, there was always,
Hogan?
Nelson said he always played at 80%.
Okay.
Byron was a great player, you know.
Yeah.
And he always played at 80, but he said he had that 20 when he needed it.
Okay. Right.
And
right.
they only did it when they needed it. And of course the ball didn't go nearly as far as it goes now, so it was a whole different kind of game. I mean, they were hitting 3 irons where they're hitting 8 irons today.
Sure.
And 9 irons. So it was a different game, totally different game from those days. And you really had to be precise. 260 was a good drive. That was a good length.
Yeah.
And you kept your eye open. I remember Jackie Burke, who was a brilliant guy, very smart, very funny. And he'd say, you got to watch. You got to keep your eyes open. Watch what's going on. So you're going down this fairway, and you see Hogan over there going the other way, and he comes up short of a green. You say, there must be some wind blowing, because he came up short. You know, so you always kept your eye open on what was going on with the weather and the wind. And Demerit was a great wind player. And he, because he grew up in Texas and he played a lot of wind golf. And
was he the interviewer on the Shell show?
Yeah, he replaced George Rogers. George Rogers did it for the first 3 years. 3 years, and then he got in trouble with the Shell people, and Jimmy came on.
Oh, gotcha.
Gene Sarazen was on there.
And Gene Sarazen down from the beginning, And Sarazen was a guy who didn't practice a lot. He didn't like to practice much, but he had But Sarazen had a very peculiar grip. First of all, he took his thumb off the handle. He wrapped it around this way.
Oh, so like,
and then he interlocked.
Almost with it or something.
Yeah, it was like a baseball grip.
Yeah.
And he interlocked, and the left hand would be this. He did this so he would be a little more wristy.
Okay.
He was a small guy, and he needed some wrist action to get the distance to keep up.
That's cool.
And I remember asking him about it, because there was a guy named Alex Morrison. I don't know if you know that name. Alex Morrison in the 30s was a very famous teacher. Alex Morrison was one of the first guys to take pictures of swings, and he had a great album full of guys' swings. I remember Sarazen always a pain in the neck because he was always asking you questions about your swing and all.
Yeah.
But Alex Morrison had this grip like this. He's the one who taught it. He taught it to Henry Pickard.
Oh, yeah.
Now, he taught it to everybody, but Henry Pickard was his most famous student. And Pickard is in my book, Getting to the Dance Floor, the oral history of American golf. And Pickard said Morrison believed in foot action, but he didn't raise the heel so much as he rolled his ankles, and then rolled them this way, and then downswing. And he had a very definite method, and he taught Pickard, and who became won the Masters and the PGA. He was a very fine golfer. Pickard was a very good club pro afterwards, and one of his assistants was Jack Grout, as a young man. And if you didn't teach the Morrison method, you were gone, because so Grout did. Yeah. And Grout gave it to Jack Nicklaus.
Play any sport, you should be lively on your feet. Golf is no exception. Foot action determines so many things within the golf swing that it's almost indescribable. Now let me show you how Jack Grout taught foot action to me when I was a youngster. He started with the short golf clubs, and he told me to roll my ankles, roll my left ankle in, roll my right ankle in, roll my left ankle in, roll my right ankle in.
And that's why Nicklaus had.
Stay on the inside.
But Nicklaus raised his heels a lot. But he used his feet a lot.
Yes.
And that was the key to it, using your feet. Play off your feet. Samson used to say you play this game on dancing feet. Mm-hmm. And there's a nice movement there.
So it's interesting you say that, because we started this conversation with you saying really the secret is to stay centered. But then now we're talking about dancing feet. So it's really, you're being dynamic and moving, like your pressure and everything, but you're staying centered.
You're still staying
So
centered.
those two things kind of dovetail together,
Right.
to make a dynamic good golfer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, I remember bringing that up to Jack one day,
Yeah.
and I gave him this evolution. And he said, "Yeah, I grew up with the Morrison method, and the foot action was especially important.
Yeah.
And grout, that's what grout gave him. But that's fascinating. There's a lot of wonderful theories the guys have had, but it seems like some of the best golfers just hit it."
Yeah.
They knew what they were doing.
Yeah, you get to that point of mastery, you can forget. You can just be.
One of the things I remember often is they all played with an open face, especially with the irons. They laid the clay
It
open.
would be open.
Hogan, when he first came out with his irons,
Yeah.
he made them a little open. He denied it, but they were about 2 or 3 degrees open.
Yeah.
Because they all laid it open because they all hooked. Everybody hooked because there was a lot of hand action at the ball,
Yeah.
and they hooked. And Hogan did everything he could to keep from hooking the ball.
Okay.
And that's why he went here and he went here.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't. Now I see a lot of guys. They're playing they square the club at address.
It's
It's
a
different.
kind of swing.
Different kind of swing.
Who
now.
would be the 5 greatest ball strikers you
Saw in person.
right across the generations?
Well, Sam.
Sam.
Oh,
certainly,
Sam.
Hogan.
Sam was and Hogan, absolutely. I mean, Hogan he never missed.
Yeah.
He never missed the ball. The strike was always so good. Sam, the sound was, I described it when I wrote the biography of Sam. When Sam hit an iron, it was like the door of a Rolls Royce slamming shut. I mean, it was so good. It was so solid because it was soft iron against a real balata ball.
Yeah.
And it's a sound you'll never hear anymore.
Yeah.
But it was marvelous. The contact was just beautiful. Sam and
Who's underrated as far as ball strikers that people might not have thought of?
Knutson, he didn't get enough recognition because his personality was a little off.
He didn't putt. He couldn't putt.
He didn't putt very well, right. But Knutson was very good. Yeah, Knutson. I can't think who else.
Trevino, of course.
Boros, well, Trevino was a great ball striker.
Yeah.
I remember asking, when's the last time you hit it out of bounds? He said, I don't remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, the funny thing about Trevino, there was a couple of stories. One, he had a way, he'd get up, he had a very open stance.
Yeah.
And he wanted to hit the shot that Hogan hit. And he said he'd watched him and he said, I want that shot. And he said it took me 4 years. He couldn't ask Hogan how to do it because you didn't ask Hogan how to do it.
Right.
But he watched him and he figured out his own way.
Yeah.
And he opened up and he had laid it off and all that. But he had one thing, because he was so open, he had to make sure the ball was back far enough in his stance. Otherwise, he'd be.
Yeah, low points.
Yeah. So he would always, there's the last move before taking the club back, he would step forward.
Okay.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
And he'd get it there and he had it. He was playing a tournament, a senior tournament. I got to know the league pretty well at one point. We got pretty close. And I'm watching him play it in Upper Montclair Country Club, the senior tournament.
Yeah.
And I said, you've got this thing where you kind of step forward all the time just before you go. And he said, and he goes like this. And he gets up on the next shot and he kind of hits it to the right. And he said, you son of a bitch, he told me what He started thinking about what he was doing. And he didn't want to even think about it. But he just did it.
Yeah.
That was his thing. And he got so frustrated. He said, you told me what I'm doing. He thought about it. And he brought it up. Some guy was out here at Metro here who was a golf swing guy.
Yeah.
And he took movie pictures and all that stuff. And he said he was watching Trevino on television doing an interview. And he said, some journalist told me about my making my move to the left, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, right.
And how frustrated he got. I said, that was me.
That's funny.
I don't mean to take any credit for that. But Trevino is a great ball striker, and Hogan, of course. Hogan didn't really fade the ball. They always talked about Hogan's fade.
The Hogan fade, yeah.
The Hogan fade, but it
It
just
would
hung.
go up and then fall down, but it would fall to the right.
It would fall slightly. It was like hitting. I described it once. It was like hitting the ball was going along a net. and it just on the right side and just fell.
So it was just really very straight. His
It was
ball
basically a straight shot,
Mhm.
and it was called a fade because everyone else hooked the ball so much
I
in
see.
his day,
Yeah.
and everybody was big hookers. And but you know, you watch the Shell show, that show, the match he played with
Was
Sam.
neat, yeah.
Every shot Hogan hit was a draw. He did a lot of
Well,
draws.
of course, 7,000 yards with the Persimmon and the Houston
Yep.
Country Club.
And he
That's
hit, every shot was a little bit of a draw, and he could do whatever he wanted with it.
Yeah.
Obviously. And when I remember guys.
How old was Hogan at that time?
This was 1960,
64.
64,
He's probably
and he was
45 or
19. He was
something.
12. He was born in 1912, so
Okay.
52. But I remember one of the pros, a young guy out there. He asked, he knew I knew Hogan. I said, when Hogan practiced, was it just hit and scrape, hit and scrape?
Yeah.
He said, no. He would smoke a whole cigarette before he'd hit the next shot.
I really think
Every
about
shot
it,
he
yeah.
hit was thoughtful, as though he was playing it on the golf course, and that made him a little different.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the guys would just hit
Bang
balls
balls.
to warm up.
Yeah.
Like Jack wasn't a range rat. Jack didn't hang out on the. When Jack, if he hit 2 or 3 good ones in a row, he was done,
Yeah.
and he didn't want to hit anymore. But most of the guys practice a lot. Yeah.
All right, Al. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
You guys, you just look up the name Al Barkow on Amazon. I think you see there's a list of all of his books.
Yeah.
On there.
Not Amazon. Google.
Google. Okay.
Google has everything.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Goodreads and stuff like that. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. Click the subscribe button. Thanks to John Erickson from Advanced Ball Striking for setting this up. See you. Bye.